Picture yourself standing on a windswept hillside, surrounded by the ancient stones of a monastery that has watched over this landscape for more than 1,000 years. You might think you understand this place just by looking at its weathered walls and peaceful courtyards, but beneath your feet lies a secret world, a hidden network of tunnels that stretches far beyond what the eye can see. For centuries, these underground passages have remained one of history's most intriguing mysteries, connecting sacred sites across vast distances and through impossible terrain. How did medieval monks accomplish such astonishing feats of engineering? What compelled them to dig these clandestine corridors, often in complete secrecy? And what profound truths or treasures were they trying to protect? These are not just forgotten footnotes in history books. The hidden tunnels connecting ancient monasteries represent something far greater, a testament to human ingenuity, spiritual devotion, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge against all odds. From the remote mountains of Ethiopia to the misty valleys of Ireland, and deep within the forests of medieval Europe, these subterranean pathways tell a story that has fascinated explorers and historians for generations. They speak of communities bound by faith, scholars preserving wisdom during times of turmoil, and architects whose brilliance was centuries ahead of their time. Yet, despite their significance, many of these tunnels remain shrouded in mystery, their full purposes and extent still unknown. In this video, we're going to embark on a journey into the depths of these extraordinary underground networks. Together, we'll uncover how these tunnels were built, why they remained hidden for so long, and what they reveal about the interconnectedness of ancient civilizations. You'll discover astonishing engineering marvels that defy conventional understanding, hear tales of bravery and secrecy, and see how these hidden passages served as lifelines for survival, spirituality, and the safeguarding of knowledge. This is more than a history lesson. It's an adventure into the very heart of human curiosity and resilience. So settle in, open your mind to the wonders of the past, and prepare to explore the secrets lying just beneath the surface of some of the world's most sacred places. To truly appreciate these architectural marvels, we first need to step into the world of the people who built them. The motivations driving monastic communities to undertake such backbreaking labor were as varied as the tunnels themselves, often blending the practical with the profoundly spiritual. The most immediate and powerful reason was security. The medieval world was a volatile and often dangerous place, filled with the very real threats of Viking raids, political upheavals, and local conflicts. Monasteries, as repositories of both spiritual and material wealth, were prime targets. They housed sacred relics, often adorned with gold and precious gems, and their libraries contained priceless hand-copied manuscripts. An underground network provided a vital line of defense. When scouts spotted raiders on the horizon, monks could use these passages to swiftly evacuate into the surrounding wilderness or to a fortified hiding place, taking their most valuable treasures with them. It wasn't just about saving objects, it was about preserving the very heart of their faith and knowledge from destruction. This need for protection extended beyond sudden raids into the realm of sacred duty. The discreet transportation of relics was a critical function of these tunnels. In an age of deep reverence, the public movement of a saint's relics was a major event that could draw enormous crowds and, unfortunately, unwanted attention from thieves or rival factions. Tunnels offered a secure, private way to transfer these holy items between altars, different monastery buildings, or even to other friendly institutions without risking their safety. This ensured that the spiritual power and sanctity of the relics remained undisturbed by the secular world, allowing the monks to fulfill their role as guardians without fanfare or fear. Yet, not every reason was born of conflict or secrecy. There was also a powerful element of pure, simple convenience dictated by the elements. In regions with harsh winters or relentless rainy seasons, these tunnels acted as sheltered highways. Imagine a monk needing to travel from the scriptorium, where he was illuminating a manuscript, to the cloister for prayer, and then to the refectory for a meal. Instead of bundling up against freezing winds or trudging through deep mud, he could take a clean, dry, and direct route underground. This preserved not only his comfort but also his focus, allowing the daily rhythm of prayer and work, the sacred Opus Dei, to continue uninterrupted by the whims of weather. It was a brilliant logistical solution that supported the monastery's functional operation year-round. Perhaps the most philosophically interesting purpose was the preservation of isolation. Monasteries were intentionally established as places set apart from the world, havens for contemplation and spiritual pursuit. However, they still needed supplies, communication, and the occasional interaction with the outside community. This created a paradox: how to engage with the world without being of the world. Tunnels provided an elegant solution. They allowed for the discreet arrival of visitors or the receipt of goods without the constant comings and goings disrupting the quiet atmosphere of the cloister. More importantly, they served as emergency escape routes, ensuring that if the outside world did forcibly intrude, the community could vanish without a trace, maintaining their separation and safety. These hidden pathways were, in a very real sense, the physical manifestation of a spiritual boundary, a way to control access and protect the sacred solitude within. Long before the great stone monasteries of the medieval era, the very first Christian communities were already mastering the art of living and worshipping underground, carving out a hidden world that would become the blueprint for everything that followed. To understand the origins of monastic tunnel networks, we must travel back to the first few centuries after the death of Christ, to a time when being a Christian in the Roman Empire was not just unpopular, but often illegal and punishable by death. This constant threat of persecution forced these early believers to find ingenious ways to practice their faith in complete secrecy. Their brilliant and deeply practical solution was to go underground, literally, creating the vast and intricate labyrinths we now know as the catacombs. The most famous of these are, of course, the catacombs of Rome, but describing them simply as cemeteries or burial grounds misses their true complexity and purpose. They were, in fact, massive subterranean cities of the dead that also served as vital hubs for the living faithful. Stretching for hundreds of miles beneath the city, these networks were not natural caves. They were meticulously engineered constructions. Teams of specialized workers known as fossors or diggers used simple tools like pickaxes and shovels to carve through the soft, volcanic tufa rock that underlies Rome. This material was ideal, soft enough to be excavated relatively easily with hand tools, yet structurally stable enough to support the weight of the city above, allowing for the creation of high ceilings and wide passageways. The design was both functional and symbolic. The tunnels were organized in a grid-like pattern with multiple levels connected by narrow staircases. Along the walls, they carved out long, horizontal niches called loculi to hold individual bodies stacked from floor to ceiling. But these catacombs were far more than just a repository for the deceased. They became sacred spaces for community and worship. In hidden chambers known as cubicula, families would gather for funeral rites and during times of intense persecution to celebrate the Eucharist. These acts of worship, conducted in flickering lamplight deep beneath the earth, were a powerful declaration of faith and a profound source of strength for a community living under constant fear. This underground world also served a critical practical function as a clandestine communication network. Secret passages connecting different burial complexes allowed Christians to move between meeting points, share news, and evade Roman authorities. Certain crypts, often those of revered martyrs, became central pilgrimage sites, and the tunnels provided a discreet way for pilgrims to visit without drawing attention. The catacombs were, in essence, the first truly multifunctional religious tunnel systems combining burial, worship, pilgrimage, and secure transit into one incredible hidden infrastructure. When the Edict of Milan in 313 AD finally legalized Christianity, the immediate need for such secrecy faded. Worship moved above ground into grand basilicas. However, the knowledge, the spiritual significance, and the architectural principles of these underground sanctuaries did not vanish. They were absorbed into the emerging monastic tradition. The early desert fathers, seeking isolation, lived in caves. Later, as communal monasticism spread across Europe, the strategic lessons from the Roman catacombs were adapted on a monumental scale. The concept of a hidden, protected space for sacred community life was transplanted from the persecuted urban churches to the remote, fortified monasteries. The fossors' digging techniques, their understanding of geology and structural support, and the very idea of a multi-purpose subterranean network became part of the monastic toolkit, evolving over centuries into the astonishing stone tunnels we find beneath abbey as monasticism flourished across Europe. The simple tunnels of the early Christians evolved into breathtakingly sophisticated subterranean networks, becoming the central nervous systems of some of the continent's most powerful religious institutions. Orders like the Benedictines, with their famous motto Ora et Labora, prayer and work, and their Cistercian successors, known for their architectural austerity and agricultural prowess, were not just spiritual leaders but master engineers. They transformed the humble tunnel into a multifunctional tool essential for the daily operation, security, and economic survival of their sprawling monastic complexes. Consider the awe-inspiring Mont Saint-Michel, a Benedictine abbey perched on a rocky island off the coast of Normandy. To the pilgrims who see it today, it is a stunning granite fortress reaching towards the heavens. But its true genius lies in what remains hidden from view. The monks constructed a complex labyrinth of underground passages and storerooms directly within the rock itself. These tunnels served a critical and very practical purpose: logistics. Supplying a community of hundreds on a tidal island was a monumental challenge. The tunnels allowed for the efficient movement of supplies brought in by boat at the base of the mount. Food, wine, building materials, and fuel could be hauled up through these internal passageways, away from the elements and the crowded, narrow streets above. This system ensured the monastery could remain self-sufficient and operational, even during fierce Atlantic storms or periods of siege, a testament to brilliant foresight and planning. This logistical brilliance was matched by a more somber defensive necessity, a theme powerfully illustrated during the English Reformation, when King Henry VIII ordered the dissolution of the monasteries in the 1530s. These hidden networks became the last hope for many communities. Monasteries like those in the north of England, which fiercely opposed the king's break from Rome, used their tunnels to hide priests, sacred vessels, and invaluable illuminated manuscripts from the king's commissioners. There are persistent legends, particularly around sites like Fountains Abbey, of tunnels leading miles away to safe houses, allowing monks to escape with their most precious treasures. While some of these tales may be embellished by time, they speak to a very real and desperate use of these spaces. Archaeological evidence often reveals carefully concealed chambers and blocked-off passages, silent witnesses to a frantic scramble to preserve a way of life that was being systematically destroyed from above. In German-speaking lands, the purpose of these tunnels took on another fascinating dimension, deeply entwined with the region's booming monastic beer industry. Monasteries like the Ambience Abbey in Bavaria and the Weltenberg Abbey, which sits on the Danube River, developed elaborate underground networks that were less about hiding and more about production and storage. They excavated vast, deep cellars, often multi-leveled, that maintained a constant, cool temperature year-round, a natural refrigerator perfect for lagering beer. These cellars were frequently connected by tunnels to the brewery above and to nearby river docks, creating an efficient pipeline for receiving grains and shipping out finished barrels. This wasn't just a matter of convenience, it was a key factor in their economic success. The ability to produce and store large quantities of high-quality beer provided a steady source of income that supported the monastery's religious and charitable works, proving that these underground wonders were as much about practical commerce as they were about spiritual contemplation. While the monasteries of Western Europe were perfecting their underground networks, a parallel and equally astonishing story was unfolding far to the east under the vast dome of the Byzantine Empire. Here, the challenges were different and the engineering solutions even more dramatic. In regions like Cappadocia in modern-day Turkey, the very landscape seemed designed for secrecy. This is a place of surreal beauty where millennia of wind and water have sculpted the soft volcanic rock into a fantastic terrain of towering cones, deep valleys, and sheer cliffs. It was into this otherworldly stone that Byzantine monks performed what can only be described as architectural miracles, not just building monasteries, but carving entire, invisible cities directly into the living rock. The most famous of these, the Garim Valley, is a testament to human resilience and devotion. From the outside, many of these structures appear as little more than simple doorways or windows high up on a cliff face. But step inside and you enter a multi-level universe. These were not mere caves, they were elaborate complexes that included churches with beautifully painted frescoes, spacious refectories, communal kitchens, wine presses, stables, and hundreds of individual monastic cells. Connecting all of this was a labyrinth of tunnels, staircases, and passages, often spanning several stories vertically and horizontally across entire mountainsides. The primary motivation for this incredible subterranean effort was once again defense. The Byzantine Empire was a constant target for Arab raids from the east, and these rock-cut sanctuaries were virtually impregnable. Entrances could be concealed, and narrow, easily defensible tunnels allowed residents to retreat deeper into the complex or even to escape to the surface miles away if a section was breached. But there was another, more subtle threat that these tunnels helped the faithful navigate: the internal religious turmoil of the iconoclast period. For over a century, between the 8th and 9th centuries, the empire was violently divided over the use of religious icons. Emperors who opposed icons, the iconoclasts, ordered the systematic destruction of these sacred images, sending soldiers to seek out and whitewash the beautiful frescoes in churches across their lands. For monks and devout Christians who believed in the veneration of icons, this was an unbearable desecration. The hidden tunnels and secret chambers of Cappadocia became a sanctuary for the very art and worship that was being persecuted above ground. A monk could lead a small congregation through a disguised entrance, down a narrow tunnel, and into a perfectly preserved church, its walls glowing with vibrant paintings of Christ and the saints, where they could worship in secret, safe from the eyes of the authorities. This tradition of rock-cut secrecy extended beyond Cappadocia into the heart of the Orthodox world. In Greece, the monasteries of Meteora are famous for their impossible, gravity-defying perch atop towering rock pillars. While most access today is by staircases cut into the rock or modern bridges, originally, the only way up was by removable ladders or by being hauled up in a net, a deliberate and brilliant security measure. Less famous but equally fascinating are the tunnels within these stone pillars themselves. Many of the Meteora monasteries contain hidden chambers and passages within their foundations, used for storage, as escape routes, or as hermitages for monks seeking absolute solitude. Similarly, in the mountains of North Macedonia, the St. John Bogorski Monastery and other sites are built into cliffs, with natural and carved tunnels providing connections between buildings and offering strategic advantages and a profound sense of isolation from the world below. These eastern tunnels speak to a different kind of monastic ideal, one of not just hiding from invaders, but of physically ascending and separating from earthly concerns, using the very fabric of the earth to create a bridge between the secular and the divine. Far to the west, on the wild, windswept fringes of Europe, another monastic tradition developed some of the most remote and spiritually intense tunnel networks of all. The Celtic monks of Ireland, Scotland, and Wales sought a different kind of isolation, not just separation from the world, but a profound confrontation with the raw power of nature and the divine. Their approach to tunneling was not about grand, engineered networks for logistics, but about survival, seclusion, and a deeply personal path to salvation, often carved into the most unforgiving landscapes imaginable. Nowhere is this spirit more powerfully embodied than on Skellig Michael, a jagged 700-foot-high rock pyramid that rises from the Atlantic Ocean nearly 12 miles off the coast of Ireland. The very act of establishing a monastery here was a statement of extreme faith and determination. The monks who settled here in the 6th or 7th century built a collection of remarkable stone, dome-shaped dwellings known as beehive huts, clinging to a terraced ledge near the summit. But the true marvel lies beneath your feet. To access the main monastic complex from the treacherous landing point, the monks carved a staggering series of over 600 stone steps directly into the rock face, a vertiginous pathway that feels more like a ladder to heaven than a simple staircase. Beyond this, they excavated a complex system of underground tunnels and passages that connected the clustered huts, the oratory, and various cisterns for collecting precious fresh water. These narrow, stone-lined corridors, often low and requiring one to crouch, were not for grand processions but for practical, protected movement across the exposed rock. During the ferocious gales that regularly batter the island, these passages provided the only safe way to move between buildings, to tend to the gardens, or to pray in the chapel without being swept away by the violent winds. They were the literal arteries of the community, allowing life to persist in a place that seemed utterly hostile to it. This need for protected circulation was a common feature across Celtic monastic sites. On the mainland, at places like the Galaris Oratory in Ireland or remote communities in Scotland's Inner Hebrides, low, tunnel-like passages often connected living quarters, scriptoriums, and chapels. These structures ensured the daily rhythm of prayer and work could continue uninterrupted by the relentless Atlantic weather. But the purpose of these subterranean routes soon evolved from practical shelter into something far more urgent, a desperate means of escape. Starting in the late 8th century, the coastal monasteries of Ireland and Scotland became prime targets for Viking raiders who sought the rich treasures of gold, silver, and jeweled relics held within these sacred walls. The monks, renowned for their scholarship and artistry, were suddenly faced with an existential threat from the sea. In response, the tunnels took on a new defensive life. At monasteries like Nendrum on Mahee Island in Northern Ireland or Iona in Scotland, archaeological evidence points to the clever use of the landscape for evasion. While extensive man-made tunnels are less common than on Skellig Michael, the monks utilized natural caves, souterrains, underground man-made chambers, and secret pathways that were known only to them. The concept was one of swift and total disappearance. When lookout monks stationed on the coast spotted the distinct outline of Viking longships on the horizon, they would raise the alarm. The community would then have a precious, short window of time to gather their most sacred items, the chalice, the relics, the illuminated manuscripts they had spent lifetimes creating, and vanish. They would flee into these hidden underground passages, which often led to concealed sea caves where small boats might be kept, or deep into the surrounding bogs and forests, leaving the raiders to find an empty and therefore worthless settlement. These tunnels were no longer just about moving between buildings. They were lifelines meticulously designed to preserve not just physical safety, but the very soul of their culture in the face of annihilation. The legacy of these networks is etched into the Celtic landscape and its lore. In Wales, places like the Anthony Priory in the Vale of Ewers are rumored to have tunnels leading miles into the surrounding Black Mountains, stories that speak to a long memory of needing escape routes. The tunnels of the Celtic monks stand as a powerful testament to a faith that was both fiercely strong and incredibly vulnerable. They represent a dual commitment, an unshakable devotion to God that drove them to the very edge of the world, and a pragmatic will to survive that compelled them to dig deep into the earth itself to protect the light of their learning from being extinguished by the darkness of their times. High in the thin air of the Himalayas, where the sky feels close enough to touch, Tibetan Buddhist monks engineered tunnel systems that served a purpose far beyond the physical. They were pathways to enlightenment itself. The most iconic of these is undoubtedly the Potala Palace in Lhasa, the historic winter palace of the Dalai Lamas. To the countless pilgrims who circle its majestic white and red walls, it is a monumental symbol of faith and power. But its true depth lies hidden within. The palace is not just built upon the rock, it is fused with it, containing a vast, multi-level labyrinth of underground chambers, corridors, and tunnels that wind deep into the foundation of the mountain. These passages were not merely for storage or servants. They formed a critical circulatory system for the palace's intricate spiritual and political life. They allowed high lamas to move between ceremonial halls, private quarters, and secluded chapels without crossing the public courtyards, preserving an aura of mystery and sanctity. More practically, they served as a vital security measure, providing escape routes and secure communication channels during times of intrigue or invasion, safeguarding the spiritual leadership of Tibetan Buddhism. Beyond the grand palaces, the purpose of these tunnels took on a deeply personal dimension in the form of yongdams, or meditation retreat tunnels. For a monk seeking the ultimate state of realization, isolation was not a preference but a necessity. High in the mountains, often near remote monasteries like those surrounding the sacred Mount Kailash, monks would seek out or carve small, isolated caves connected to the main community by nothing more than a narrow, treacherous path. In some cases, these hermitages were linked by a network of ancient tunnels, allowing a senior teacher to discreetly check on a student in deep meditation without the disruptive formality of a visit. The tunnel itself became part of the spiritual practice, a physical manifestation of the transition from the noisy, external world of illusion, known as samsara, into the silent, internal world of truth or nirvana. A monk would enter this confined, dark space for a retreat that could last for years, emerging only when they had attained a profound understanding of the nature of mind. The tunnel was both a doorway and a barrier, separating the meditator from all worldly distractions. This need for secrecy and protected movement became tragically paramount during the mid-20th century, a period of immense political upheaval. Following the Chinese annexation of Tibet, many monasteries faced suppression, and monks often risked persecution for practicing their faith. It was during this time that the ancient tunnel networks assumed their most critical role as clandestine highways for survival. Whispers and first-hand accounts tell of secret passages linking key monasteries, sometimes running for miles beneath the mountains, allowing monks and precious religious texts to be moved undetected. A holy text or a revered teacher could be smuggled from a monastery under watch to a safer, more remote one through these subterranean routes. These were not tunnels of convenience but of necessity, used under the cover of darkness to preserve a culture that was under threat. They became the silent, unseen defenders of a spiritual lineage, ensuring that the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism could continue to be passed from master to student, even in the most dangerous of times. The very earth, once a medium for solitude, became a shield for an entire way of life. While the tunnels of Europe and Asia were built within or beneath existing landscapes in the highlands of Ethiopia, medieval craftsmen performed an act of creation in reverse, carving not just tunnels, but entire sacred cities directly downward from the living rock. The most breathtaking example of this is the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Lalibela, a complex of 11 monolithic churches hewn from a single mass of reddish volcanic tuff in the 12th and 13th centuries. To call them buildings is a misnomer. They are sculptures on a colossal scale, each one excavated downward from the plateau, surrounded by deep trenches and connected by a mind-bending labyrinth of tunnels, passageways, and ceremonial courtyards. This was not a hidden network added to an existing monastery. The tunnels were part of the original divine vision, integral to both the function and the profound spiritual symbolism of the entire complex. The construction techniques employed here defy belief and remain a subject of awe and mystery even today. The master builders, likely working with simple iron tools like chisels, picks, and axes, began by carving a deep, rectangular trench down into the solid rock, isolating a massive block. Then, with astonishing precision and patience, they would hollow out this block from the inside out, shaping the exterior walls, carving intricate windows, pillars, and arches, and finally sculpting the vast interior spaces, all without the margin for error that conventional construction allows. The tunnels connecting these subterranean churches were carved in the same way, often starting from the courtyards and trenches that separate the structures. Some are wide, processional routes, while others are narrow, twisting, and dark, requiring visitors to stoop or even crawl. The most famous of these is the symbolic passage between the house of the Savior of the world and the house of the cross, which pilgrims traverse in darkness, representing a journey through hell toward salvation. The engineering sophistication is staggering. The builders incorporated sophisticated drainage channels to divert rainwater and prevent flooding, and they understood the rock's structural properties intimately, ensuring these freestanding rock monuments have endured for nearly a millennium. The religious significance of this interconnected design is deep and multifaceted. Lalibela was conceived as a new Jerusalem, a pilgrimage destination for Ethiopian Christians who could not make the perilous journey to the Holy Land. The layout and names of the churches mirror their counterparts in Jerusalem. The tunnels, therefore, are not just corridors, they are sacred pathways that allow pilgrims to physically reenact spiritual journeys. Moving through the complex is a form of active meditation. The experience is deliberately choreographed, moving from sunlit courtyards into shadowy tunnels, from expansive churches into cramped hermit cells, mirroring the Christian cycle of life, death, and resurrection. This physical movement through a controlled environment was designed to evoke a powerful emotional and spiritual response, making the biblical stories tangible and immediate. This network also facilitated the complex and secretive ceremonies that are central to Ethiopian Orthodox worship. The tunnels provided private access for priests between the churches, allowing them to prepare for rituals away from the public eye. Certain tunnels lead to hidden chambers believed to be ancient scriptoriums where sacred texts were copied, or to treasuries where processional crosses and manuscripts were stored securely. The most sacred object, the tabot, a replica of the Ark of the Covenant, is kept within the Holy of Holies in each church, veiled from view. During major festivals like Timkat Epiphany, the tabot is wrapped in rich cloths and ceremonially paraded through these very tunnels and courtyards in a vibrant, joyful procession of priests, deacons, and worshippers. The tunnels amplify the mystery and sanctity of these moments, shielding the most sacred elements of the faith until the precise moment of their revelation to the faithful. Beyond Lalibela, this tradition of rock-hewn secrecy extends to other Ethiopian monastic communities, many even older and more remote. The churches of Tigray, precariously perched on cliff faces, often contain tunnels that lead to hidden inner sanctuaries or to hermits' caves accessible only to the most devout. These sites, like Abuna Yamata Gao, which requires a sheer rock climb to access, represent the ultimate fusion of spiritual aspiration and physical isolation. The tunnels here are less about public procession and more about achieving a state of pure devotion, separating the monastic community from Chinese letter world entirely. Together, these Ethiopian wonders represent a unique chapter in the history of monastic tunnels, one where the entire spiritual landscape was intentionally designed from the top down, with every tunnel, trench, and doorway serving a dual purpose of practical movement and profound religious metaphor, carving a pathway to heaven directly out of the earth. While the monolithic wonders of Lalibela were being carved in Ethiopia, another ancient Christian tradition was developing an equally sophisticated, though far less visible, network of tunnels half a continent away in the deserts of Egypt. The Coptic Orthodox Church, tracing its origins directly back to the teachings of Saint Mark in the 1st century, is one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. And for much of its long history, it has existed as a minority faith, a reality that profoundly shaped its architecture and its survival strategies. The Coptic monastic communities that blossomed in the arid wastes of Wadi el-Natron and the Eastern Desert did not just build monasteries. They engineered intricate subterranean systems that became the lifeblood of their faith during centuries of upheaval. The desert itself was both a sanctuary and a battlefield. For the early desert fathers, the vast emptiness offered a perfect escape from Roman persecution and the distractions of city life, a place to pursue a life of ascetic devotion. But by the early medieval period, a new threat emerged from the very emptiness they sought: desert raiders. The monasteries, often isolated oases of relative wealth with their libraries, vineyards, and workshops, became tempting targets for nomadic Bedouin tribes. In response, the monks transformed their homes into fortresses, and their tunnels became a primary line of defense. The fortified walls of monasteries like the Syrian monastery in Wadi el-Natron are impressive, but their true defensive genius lay underground. Networks of narrow, often twisting passages connected key buildings within the monastery walls, allowing monks to move quickly and unseen between the church, the keep, the storehouses, and the living quarters during an attack. Perhaps the most critical function was safeguarding the church's most sacred vessels and texts. Many Coptic churches were built with a special niche behind the altar, known as the heikel, which contained the altar tablet. In times of imminent danger, a hidden doorway within the heikel could lead to a secret chamber or a tunnel, allowing a priest to swiftly remove and hide these consecrated objects from desecration. There are accounts, particularly from periods of intense persecution under rulers like the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim by Amr Allah in the 11th century, of monks using these tunnels to spirit away priceless manuscripts, including ancient copies of the Gospels, burying them in sealed jars in remote caves or transferring them to safer communities under the cover of darkness. These tunnels were not just escape routes, they were a guarantee that even if the stone walls above were breached, the heart of their worship could be preserved. Beyond defense, these underground pathways served a more peaceful, yet equally vital purpose, fostering connection. The deserts of Egypt are not a single, blank expanse, but a series of isolated pockets of life, separated by miles of barren, unforgiving terrain. The monasteries that dotted this landscape, while independent, were deeply bound by faith and a shared way of life. The tunnels and hidden paths that snaked through the wadis and along mountain ridges were the essential highways that linked this spiritual archipelago. A monk from the monastery of St. Anthony could travel, often by night to avoid the scorching sun and prying eyes, to the monastery of St. Paul, using a route known only to the initiated. These journeys allowed for the exchange of news, scholarly knowledge, and spiritual counsel. An abbot from one community might travel through these discreet corridors to help mediate a dispute in another, or a skilled scribe might be sent to assist in the copying of a complex manuscript. This network also sustained the physical needs of the communities. While each monastery aimed for self-sufficiency, certain supplies-specific medicinal herbs, tools, or even skilled craftsmen might only be available at a neighboring site. The tunnels provided a secure and efficient way to transport these goods without attracting the attention of potential bandits or hostile authorities. Furthermore, they played a crucial role in the most sacred of their traditions, the passing of a departed monk. Coptic monastic tradition holds that a monk's body should be prepared for burial only by the hands of his brothers. When a monk died in a hermitage far from the main monastery, his brothers would use these ancient pathways to retrieve his body, ensuring his rites were performed with dignity and in accordance with their ancient customs. In this way, the tunnels connected the communities not only in life but in death, weaving a continuous thread of fellowship and mutual support across the vast, silent desert. Perched on the edge of deep gorges and nestled high in the rugged mountains of the Caucasus, the stone monasteries of Armenia stand as timeless sentinels of faith and resilience. For centuries, these spiritual fortresses faced relentless waves of invasion from empires like the Ottomans, Persians, and Mongols, each seeking to dominate this strategic crossroads of the world. In response, Armenian monks and architects engineered some of the most sophisticated and strategically vital tunnel systems of the medieval world, transforming the very earth beneath their sanctuaries into a bulwark against extinction. These weren't merely escape routes, they were the hidden arteries of a nation, designed to preserve a unique culture, language, and Christian faith under the most dire threats imaginable. Consider the monastery of Tatov, a breathtaking complex that seems to grow directly from the cliff edge of the Vorotin River Gorge. Its strategic location was its first line of defense, but its true genius was hidden from view. Tatov was not just a spiritual center, it was a renowned university, a repository of immense knowledge with one of the finest scriptoriums in the region. Its scribes produced exquisite illuminated manuscripts, preserving not only religious texts but also Armenian history, science, and literature. When invaders approached, the value of these manuscripts was immeasurable. They contained the very soul of Armenian identity. The tunnel network at Tatov served as a secure conduit to safeguard this treasure. Manuscripts, along with sacred religious relics like processional crosses and chalices, could be swiftly moved from the scriptorium down into a labyrinth of storage chambers carved deep into the bedrock of the gorge. Some tunnels are believed to have connected to the river far below or to remote, hidden exits, allowing scholars and precious texts to be evacuated entirely if the monastery itself was overrun. This system ensured that even if the stone walls above were desecrated, the knowledge and faith within them would live on to teach future generations. This defensive ingenuity is equally evident at the Hagpat Monastery, a UNESCO World Heritage Site built in a more concealed location, tucked into a mountainside rather than perched openly on a cliff. This choice of site itself was a defensive tactic, making it harder for large armies to spot or approach. Hagpat's tunnels, often narrow and precisely carved, served a more community-focused purpose. They connected key buildings like the main church, the library, the refectory, and the living quarters, allowing the monks to move between them without exposing themselves to archers or siege engines during an attack. But their function went far beyond daily logistics. During times of extended siege, these passages provided access to a critical resource, secret water sources. Many Armenian monasteries had ingeniously concealed cisterns or tunnels leading to underground springs, ensuring that even if the above-ground wells were poisoned or blocked, the community could survive for months on this hidden supply. This combination of secure movement and resource security turned these monasteries into virtually impregnable sanctuaries, capable of weathering assaults that would have destroyed lesser fortifications. The most profound role of these tunnels, however, was their function as a clandestine communication network linking a diaspora of monasteries across the Armenian highlands. During the darkest periods of foreign dominance, when the open practice of Christianity was suppressed and Armenian culture was actively suppressed, these underground pathways became a nervous system for national survival. A messenger could travel from Tatov to Hagpat or to other centers like Sanahin, moving discreetly through tunnels and mountain passes to share news, coordinate responses to threats, and transport priests between communities. This network allowed the Armenian Apostolic Church to maintain its ecclesiastical structure and continue ordaining priests in secret, ensuring the spiritual lineage never broke. It was through these hidden channels that manuscripts, music, and liturgical traditions were shared and preserved, preventing the cultural isolation that could have led to assimilation and loss. The tunnels physically embodied the unbreakable connection between scattered Armenian communities, allowing them to act as a unified, resilient whole even when their world above ground was fractured by conquest. The legacy of these subterranean marvels is deeply woven into the Armenian spirit. They are a powerful testament to a people who refused to vanish, using intellect and faith to outlast empire after empire. The tunnels were not symbols of fear, but of profound hope, a literal digging in of the heels to ensure that the light of their culture would never be extinguished. They allowed Armenian monks to be more than just guardians of faith. They became guardians of a nation's memory, ensuring that the stories, the songs, and the scriptures would endure deep within the mountains, waiting for a time when they could emerge once again into the sun. Venturing north and east into the vast lands of Rus, we find a tradition of monastic tunneling that is both macabre and magnificent, born from a relentless cycle of invasion and devotion. The most extraordinary example is the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, a sprawling monastery complex whose very name, Pechersk, means of the caves. This is not merely a monastery built above ground with tunnels added as an afterthought. The entire holy city literally grew from the inside out, beginning in the 11th century with a single cave dug by a solitary monk named Anthony. What started as a humble hermitage would eventually spiral into a vast underground labyrinth that became the spiritual bedrock of Russian Orthodoxy, serving as a sacred necropolis, a wartime refuge, and a clandestine fortress of faith. The original and most haunting function of these tunnels was as burial catacombs. Unlike the Roman catacombs, which were primarily for the dead, the Lavra's caves were for the living dead, monks who had devoted their earthly lives to achieving a heavenly one. The narrow earthen corridors, just wide enough for one person to pass, are lined with shallow recesses where the brothers would place the bodies of their departed. In a practice unique to Eastern Orthodoxy, the body was not buried but was simply laid to rest on a shelf, left to mummify naturally in the cave's unique microclimate. Over time, the remains would become revered as holy relics, and pilgrims would journey for miles to pray in the presence of these incorrupt saints, seeking blessings and miracles. The tunnels themselves, known as the Near and Far Caves, stretch for hundreds of meters underground, a silent, holy city of the dead whose presence sanctified the entire monastery above. This was not a place of fear, but of profound veneration, where the line between the earthly and the divine felt tangibly thin. This spiritual sanctuary soon had to serve a far more terrestrial purpose: survival. The 13th century brought the thunderous arrival of the Mongol Golden Horde, a force that shattered Russian principalities and laid waste to cities. Kiev itself was brutally sacked in 1240. In the face of such an overwhelming and merciless enemy, the Lavra's tunnels became a last resort for defense and concealment. When scouts spotted the approaching Mongol cavalry, the monks would have precious little time to react. They could usher the local community into the deeper, more concealed sections of the cave network, hiding women, children, and the elderly. The narrow, twisting passages acted as a powerful defensive bottleneck. A single armed monk could hold a corridor against multiple attackers, buying critical time for those hiding deeper within. There are also persistent legends of tunnels that extended far beyond the monastery walls, leading to the Dnieper River or to hidden forest exits, providing a final, desperate means of escape if the main complex was overrun. These subterranean passages ensured that even if the beautiful above-ground churches were desecrated or burned, the heart of the community, its people and its faith, could endure underground, waiting to emerge and rebuild. This role as a protector of faith reached its most critical apex in the 20th century during the systematic anti-religious campaigns of the Soviet Union. The Lavra, like all religious institutions, was seized by the state. Its churches were converted into museums of atheism or warehouses, and its monks were dispersed, imprisoned, or executed. It was during this era of sanctioned persecution that the ancient tunnels once again became a vital sanctuary. For devout believers, the sealed-off catacombs became a secret destination for underground worship. Knowing the maze-like layout from generations of pilgrimage, they would find disguised entrances to slip into the darkened caves, where a daring priest would hold an illicit liturgy by candlelight. The very presence of the saints' relics, hidden away in the darkness, offered an immense comfort and a powerful symbol of resilience. The faith that the Soviet authorities had tried to museumize and eradicate was in fact alive and whispering prayers in the earth beneath their feet. The tunnels also served as a crucial hiding place for the monastery's most precious physical treasures. As the Bolsheviks moved to confiscate and melt down sacred items for their gold and silver, quick-thinking monks and faithful parishioners would smuggle priceless icons, jeweled chalices, and ancient manuscripts into the deepest, most forgotten chambers of the catacombs, walling them up behind false panels of earth and brick. These actions were incredibly dangerous, undertaken at the risk of one's life, but they ensured that a vast trove of cultural and religious heritage survived the Soviet onslaught virtually intact. When the Lavra was finally returned to the Orthodox Church in the late 1980s, many of these hidden treasures were rediscovered and restored to their rightful place, a testament to the courage of those who used the earth itself to protect their sacred legacy. The tunnels of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra thus tell a continuous story of a faith that has repeatedly been forced underground, only to draw strength from the darkness and emerge once more unbroken into the light. Across the sea in Japan, a distinct and deeply spiritual form of tunneling evolved within the sacred geography of its mountain monasteries. Here, the driving force was not just defense or logistics, but the pursuit of enlightenment through extreme austerity and secrecy. Japanese Buddhism, particularly the esoteric sects of Shingon and Tendai, embraced the mountains as holy realms, places where the boundary between the human and the divine was at its thinnest. Monasteries like Mount Koya and Mount Hiei were not built upon the mountains, they were woven into their very fabric, with tunnel networks serving as arteries for a hidden spiritual life that flourished away from the eyes of the Chinese letter world. For the ascetic monks known as Yamabushi, or those who lie down in the mountains, these tunnels were integral to their rigorous spiritual training. The mountains were seen as a living mandala, a sacred map of the Buddhist cosmos, and to traverse them was to embark on a symbolic journey toward awakening. Tunnels and narrow, artificially enhanced cave passages were often the final leg of a punishing pilgrimage route, leading to secluded meditation halls or tiny cells carved into cliff faces. Entering such a space represented a metaphorical death and rebirth. The monk would leave the profane world behind, passing through a dark, constricted tunnel, a womb of earth, to emerge into a sacred space for a retreat that could last for years. The physical challenge of accessing these sites, often involving precarious climbs and squeezes through narrow rock passages, was itself a form of purification, stripping away ego and attachment before the real work of meditation could even begin. This isolation was also paramount for the protection and transmission of secret teachings, known as Haiden. Esoteric Buddhism is built upon the concept of direct, oral transmission from master to initiated disciple. These teachings, encompassing intricate rituals, sacred mantras, and complex visualizations, were considered too powerful and too sacred to be written down or shared with the uninitiated. The tunnel-connected hermitages high in the mountains provided the perfect, secure environment for this clandestine knowledge transfer. A master could lead a trusted disciple deep into a network of caves or through a hidden tunnel to a chamber utterly removed from the main temple complex. There, in the absolute silence and seclusion guaranteed by stone and earth, the master would whisper the sacred formulas, ensuring they were passed on without any risk of being overheard. These tunnels were, in effect, a security system for the soul, safeguarding the most potent spiritual technologies of their tradition. Furthermore, the turbulent periods of Japanese history, marked by constant samurai conflicts and political power struggles, gave these tunnels a very practical defensive purpose. Major monastic centers like Enryoku-ji on Mount He were not just spiritual institutions, they were powerful landholders who maintained their own armies of warrior monks or sohei. During the Sengoku, the era of warring states, these complexes were often drawn into the political and military fray, making them targets for ambitious daimyos like Oda Nobunaga, who famously razed Enryoku-ji in 1571. In this volatile environment, the mountain tunnel networks became vital for survival. They allowed for the covert movement of people and supplies during a siege, provided hidden routes for evacuation, and offered secure storage for sacred treasures and irreplaceable sutras. A samurai army might storm the temple halls above, only to find them empty, the community and its treasures having vanished into the labyrinthine passages of the mountain itself, waiting for the danger to pass before re-emerging to rebuild. What makes these hidden networks even more incredible is the sheer genius behind their construction. We're talking about monumental engineering projects undertaken 1,000 years ago, often in remote locations, using nothing more than hand tools, human labor, and an almost supernatural understanding of geology and physics. The first and most fundamental challenge was simply breaking the earth. In places like Cappadocia or the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, the material was relatively soft volcanic tuff. Here, monks and their teams of laborers, likely using iron-tipped pickaxes, chisels, and hammers, would have worked with meticulous patience. They didn't have the luxury of dynamite or jackhammers. Every inch of stone was removed by the strength of human arms. The process was one of careful subtraction, starting from a single entrance and slowly carving inward and downward, shaping entire churches, halls, and tunnels from a single, solid block of rock. This required an incredible spatial imagination. They were essentially sculpting in the dark, visualizing the magnificent empty space they were creating within the unbroken stone. In regions with harder rock, like the granite of Skellig Michael or the limestone of European cliffs, the technique shifted to what we might call cut and cover. Instead of carving from the inside out, workers would first quarry the stone from an open trench or cliff face, then use those very same stones to line and roof the tunnel they had just created. This method is evident in the magnificent corbelled stonework of Celtic beehive huts and their connecting passageways. The monks became master stonemasons, carefully selecting and shaping each stone so that they could be stacked in overlapping courses, each layer cantilevering slightly inward until the space was sealed with a capstone at the top. This created an immensely strong, self-supporting arch that could withstand centuries of crushing weight from the earth above and the lashing winds of the Atlantic. The precision of this dry stone walling, achieved without any mortar, is a testament to a skill so refined it feels almost otherworldly. But a tunnel is more than just a hole in the ground. It is a living environment that must breathe and remain standing. The solutions medieval monks devised for ventilation and structural support are where their engineering prowess truly shines. For ventilation, they employed remarkably clever passive systems. They often constructed vertical shafts known as air vents or light wells that ran from the tunnel up to the surface. These shafts served a dual purpose. They allowed fresh air to circulate down into the depths, preventing suffocation and dissipating the smoke from the lamps or torches used for lighting, while also providing tiny pinpricks of daylight to guide the way. In larger complexes, the strategic placement of multiple entrances and exits would create a natural cross breeze, drawing stale air out and pulling fresh air in. It was a perfect energy-free system that required no moving parts, just a profound understanding of airflow. Preventing collapse was a constant and deadly serious concern. The builders were intuitive geniuses in structural geology. They knew to route their tunnels through the most stable strata of rock, avoiding fault lines and areas of loose soil. Inside, they left natural rock pillars at regular intervals to act as supports, a technique seen in the Roman catacombs and later copied in medieval mines. In wider tunnels or chambers, they carved graceful Gothic or Romanesque arches into the walls and ceilings. This wasn't just for aesthetics. The arched form is phenomenally strong, perfectly distributing the immense weight of the overhead material down the sides of the tunnel and into the ground, preventing cave-ins. In some Armenian and Coptic monasteries, you can even find evidence of wooden support frames and lintels installed during construction, a temporary measure that was often left in place to become a permanent part of the tunnel's skeleton. Perhaps the most intriguing question of all is how such massive, disruptive construction projects were kept secret. The answer lies in a combination of geography, community, and clever deception. Many of these monasteries were built in locations chosen specifically for their isolation: remote islands, deep forests, or inaccessible mountaintops. This natural seclusion meant there were very few outside witnesses to the constant coming and going of laborers and the piles of excavated earth. The work itself was also likely conducted in phases, often under the cover of expansion projects that were already visible and above board. A team digging a new cellar for wine storage could secretly branch off to dig a tunnel leading elsewhere. The vast amounts of spoil, the dirt and rock dug out of the tunnels, posed a significant challenge. To avoid suspicion, this material had to be disposed of with incredible care. It was often quietly used as infill for other construction projects within the monastery walls, spread thinly across gardens to enrich the soil, or, in the most dramatic cases, dumped into nearby lakes or rivers under the cover of darkness. The monks understood that their greatest security lay in invisibility, and that meant leaving no trace of their clandestine work for the outside world to discover. Navigating these pitch-black, often bewildering labyrinths required a system far more sophisticated than mere memory. For the monks who called these tunnels home, finding their way was a matter of spiritual and physical survival, achieved through a hidden language of symbols, sound, and meticulously preserved secret knowledge. Imagine standing at the mouth of a tunnel, your only light a flickering oil lamp casting dancing shadows on the rough-hewn walls. In every direction, passages branch off into darkness. How would you know which way leads to the scriptorium, which to the river exit, and which to a dead end? The answer lies in a code etched into the very stone. One of the most common methods was the use of subtle, often invisible markings. In European monasteries, stonemasons and monks would carve small, seemingly random symbols at key junctions: a cross with one arm slightly longer than the others, a circle with a dot in a specific quadrant, or a series of shallow nicks in the stonework. To the uninitiated, these appeared as natural imperfections or simple decorative flourishes, but to those trained in the code, they were a clear map. A mark at eye level on the right might indicate the correct path, while one near the floor on the left could signal a dangerous drop or a blocked passage. In the Coptic tunnels of Egypt, these signs were sometimes painted with mixtures of ochre and other natural pigments that were only visible in the specific wavelength of light cast by an oil lamp, completely invisible in total darkness or bright sunlight. This ensured that even if an outsider found their way in, they would lack the key to decipher the guiding signs. Beyond the visual, monks engineered the tunnels themselves to act as a navigational instrument through sound. This acoustic guidance system is one of the most brilliant and least appreciated facets of their design. In the winding tunnels of places like the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, the builders would incorporate specific sonic features. A narrow, low-ceilinged passage might suddenly open into a small, domed chamber. The change in acoustics was dramatic. A whispered prayer or a faint footfall would echo and amplify in this space, acting as an auditory beacon that could guide a lost monk toward a major junction or a sanctuary. Conversely, a tunnel leading to a secret exit might be lined with soft, sound-absorbing materials like packed earth or straw to muffle the footsteps of those fleeing, making their passage undetectable to pursuers. The very act of moving through the dark became a practice of deep listening, where the quality of silence and the resonance of one's own breathing became a guide. The most vital tool, however, was not carved in stone but passed from mouth to ear, the meticulous oral tradition that preserved the mental maps of these complexes. The knowledge of a tunnel's route, its markings, and its secrets was considered sacred, restricted to a trusted few within the community, often the abbot and the senior cellarius, the monk in charge of the cellars and stores. This knowledge was transmitted through precise, ritualized repetition. A senior monk would take a novice on a guided walk through the tunnels, not just once, but repeatedly over years, quizzing him on the turns, the markings, and the stories associated with each section. The routes were often memorized in conjunction with prayers or psalms. The number of paces between the refectory tunnel and the wine cellar might be equal to the number of verses in a specific hymn. This fusion of practical information with spiritual practice ensured it was committed to memory with the same gravity as Holy Scripture. It was a living, breathing map that resided in the minds of the faithful, a safeguard that meant even if all physical records were destroyed, the knowledge could not be lost as long as the community endured. This secret knowledge was so precious that it was rarely, if ever, committed to parchment. The risk of a map falling into the wrong hands was far too great. However, there are tantalizing hints of what these ancient guides might have looked like. A few rare medieval manuscripts, often disguised within seemingly mundane texts on agriculture or astronomy, contain cryptic diagrams of spirals and lines that some scholars believe could be symbolic representations of tunnel networks. Furthermore, the stunningly accurate geometric precision in the layout of monasteries above ground suggests a mastery of surveying that would have been applied below. It is highly likely that the monks used simple but effective tools like weighted cords to measure distance and calibrated oil lamps to maintain a straight line during excavation, creating mental blueprints of remarkable accuracy. This combination of sacred oral tradition, encoded symbols, and engineered acoustics created a multi-layered security and navigation system that protected these hidden worlds for centuries, ensuring that those who belonged could always find their way, while those who did not would be hopelessly and safely lost in the dark. Beyond the tangible, expertly carved stones and the historically verified routes lies a realm where history blurs into legend, and the tunnels of monasteries stretch into the realm of the mythical. These are the stories that have been whispered for centuries around hearths and in taverns, tales that speak of impossibly long passageways, underground rivers flowing between sacred sites, and doorways to other worlds concealed beneath the abbey floor. While archaeologists may never find evidence for these legendary networks, their enduring power reveals a deeper truth about how these structures captured the human imagination, becoming symbols of ultimate mystery and connection. Some of the most persistent legends concern tunnels that defy geography, supposedly linking monasteries across vast and improbable distances. In England, one of the most famous tales surrounds the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey in Somerset and the nearby Tor, a mysterious hill steeped in Arthurian lore. Local legend insists that a secret tunnel, miles long, once connected the abbey to the summit of the Glastonbury Tor. The story goes that this passage was used by monks for secret ceremonies or as a safe route to a fortified lookout. While no such tunnel has ever been discovered, the myth persists, intertwining with other legends that identify Glastonbury as the mythical Isle of Avalon. This connection transforms the tunnel from a simple escape route into a symbolic pathway to a lost, magical world, showing how these stories often serve to heighten the spiritual significance of a place far beyond its physical history. Similar stories echo throughout Europe. In Germany, myths swirl around the ancient monastery of Niederaltaich, which is rumored to be connected by a subterranean passage to another monastery across the Danube River, a physical impossibility given the geology of the riverbed. In the Czech Republic, the Sedlec ossuary is said to have a hidden tunnel leading all the way to a monastery in a distant town. These tales often arise from a kernel of truth. Perhaps a short tunnel did indeed exist between two buildings in a local network. Over generations, as the story was retold, the distances stretched, the destinations became more grand, and the practical purpose was replaced by a more thrilling narrative of secret alliances and clandestine meetings between orders. Perhaps the most captivating legends are those that propose these tunnels were not just built by monks, but are far older, predating Christianity itself. This is a recurring theme in Ireland and Scotland, where many monasteries were strategically built on sites already considered sacred by the Druids. Folklore from these regions often speaks of the Scythian or fairy mounds, ancient burial tombs and passage graves that were believed to be entrances to the otherworld. It was said that the early Christian saints, rather than dismissing these pagan beliefs, sometimes sanctified them. The stories tell of monks purposefully building their tunnels to connect with these pre-existing Scythian, not to worship the old gods, but to symbolically demonstrate the triumph of Christianity over the pagan world by building their churches directly atop its most potent gateways. In this version of the myth, the tunnel becomes a spiritual battleground, a conduit where one world of belief literally underpins another. The concept of tunnels as portals takes an even more dramatic form in the legends of underground rivers. The idea of traveling for miles not through dug earth, but along a dark, flowing waterway captures a primal sense of adventure and mystery. One widespread European legend tells of a monk's passage, a navigable subterranean river that allowed different monastic communities to visit each other in absolute secrecy, their boats gliding silently through caverns illuminated only by their torches. While there is no evidence for a fully navigable network, this legend likely stems from the very real and clever use of natural watercourses and caves that were incorporated into monastic tunnel systems for drainage or as hidden access points. The myth elevates this practical engineering into a grand, secret highway, reflecting a desire to believe that these communities were connected in ways more profound and magical than mere footpaths. These legendary tunnels, whether stretching across counties or descending into fairy realms, ultimately serve a purpose greater than mere fantasy. They are narrative tools that communities use to explain the unknown, to enhance the prestige of their local monastery, and to express a deep-seated human desire for connection. In a world where travel was difficult and dangerous, the idea that your village church was linked by a secret road to a famous abbey miles away was a comforting and empowering thought. It placed your home at the center of a wider, hidden web of importance. These stories attribute to the monks a level of wisdom and power that borders on the supernatural, suggesting they were keepers of not just religious secrets, but the secrets of the earth itself. The legendary tunnel, therefore, is more than a myth. It is the ultimate complement to the monks' reputation for ingenuity, a folklore that grew from the very real awe that these subterranean wonders inspired in all who heard of them. For centuries, the existence of these vast monastic tunnel networks was often relegated to the realm of local legend and historical rumor. But in recent decades, a powerful combination of cutting-edge technology and old-fashioned archaeological detective work has begun to pull these subterranean secrets into the light, confirming the incredible scale and sophistication of these hidden worlds. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, has been nothing short of a revolution for this field. This non-invasive technology allows researchers to essentially see into the earth without ever lifting a shovel, sending radar pulses into the ground and mapping the reflected signals to create a three-dimensional image of buried structures. In Austria, GPR surveys around the 1100-year-old Admont Abbey revealed a stunningly complex web of tunnels and chambers completely unknown to the current monastic community, their purpose still a tantalizing mystery. Similarly, scans beneath the famous Canterbury Cathedral in England have mapped a labyrinth of passages that extend far beyond the documented medieval infrastructure, suggesting a hidden history waiting to be fully understood. Sometimes the earth reveals its secrets not through technology, but through sheer accident. urban development and construction projects have repeatedly stumbled upon these hidden passageways, often with dramatic results. In the city of Buda in Hungary, construction crews working on a new parking garage in the 1970s broke through a wall and into a perfectly preserved medieval tunnel system that once connected the city's monasteries and provided a secure route to the Danube River during the Ottoman Wars. More recently, in 2018, workers repairing a sewer line in the town of Orvieto, Italy, discovered a massive Etruscan-era tunnel that was later repurposed by medieval monks, complete with storage niches for oil and grain. These accidental discoveries are powerful reminders that these networks are not confined to remote wilderness. They lie hidden just beneath the sidewalks and streets of our modern cities, a silent, forgotten layer of history. The most thrilling discoveries, however, often come from the brave work of organized cavers and archaeologists who physically venture into these long-sealed spaces. Equipped with helmets, headlamps, and precise laser scanning equipment, these modern explorers act as cartographers of the lost. A landmark effort in this field was the comprehensive mapping of the rediscovered tunnels beneath the Valvisulo Abbey in Italy. After locating a sealed entrance mentioned in a centuries-old manuscript, a team spent years carefully clearing debris and mapping over 2 kilometers of tunnels, uncovering evidence of everything from an ancient apiary for bees to a hidden scriptorium where monks likely worked during sieges. Their work provided an unprecedented, inch-by-inch look at the daily functional reality of monastic subterranean life. Perhaps no modern discovery has captured the global imagination quite like the ongoing exploration of a tunnel network beneath a Cistercian abbey in central Poland. Local legends had long spoken of a hidden gold train or a secret Nazi repository hidden in the area. While those sensational rumors proved false, the reality was in many ways more historically significant. Using a combination of archival research (GPR) and finally physical excavation, a team uncovered the entrance to a vast tunnel system that had been deliberately collapsed and buried at the end of World War II. Inside, they found not gold, but something arguably more valuable, a perfectly preserved snapshot of monastic life from centuries prior. The tunnels were not for treasure, but for survival, used by the monks to hide from Swedish invaders during the deluge in the 17th century. The team found pottery, tools, and even the remnants of a small hearth, evidence that the monks had lived down there for extended periods. This discovery perfectly illustrates the true purpose of these spaces, not as repositories for fantastical wealth, but as sanctuaries for preserving human life and culture against the recurring tides of destruction. Each new find, whether high-tech or humble, adds another crucial piece to the puzzle, proving that the legends were not mere fantasy, but echoes of an astonishing underground reality. Preserving these incredible underground networks presents a unique and monumental challenge, one that pits the relentless forces of nature against our desire to protect humanity's fragile heritage. The primary enemy is almost always water. After centuries of stability, many of these tunnels are now facing unprecedented threats from shifting water tables and increasingly severe weather patterns brought on by climate change. In places like the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra, constant humidity from the nearby Dnieper River seeps into the soft sandstone, causing the walls to crumble and the ancient inscriptions to fade. In Ireland, more intense Atlantic storms are driving rainwater deep into the hillsides, threatening to flood the very same tunnels that once offered the monks shelter from Viking raiders. This moisture doesn't just cause physical erosion, it creates the perfect environment for destructive biological agents. Algae, fungi, and salt-loving microbes colonize the walls, their acidic excretions slowly eating away at frescoes, carvings, and the very stone itself, a silent, invisible decay that is incredibly difficult to stop. Beyond the constant drip of water, there is the ever-present danger of structural collapse. These tunnels were engineering marvels for their time, but they were not designed to last 1,000 years, especially with the modern world rumbling above them. The vibration from nearby traffic, construction, and even the footsteps of thousands of tourists can destabilize tunnels that have been precariously balanced for centuries. In the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, engineers have had to install an extensive system of hidden steel supports, cables, and drainage pipes to prevent the magnificent monuments from literally turning to dust. The goal is always to make these interventions as invisible as possible, a complex dance of strengthening the structure without destroying the authentic atmosphere and spiritual feeling of the space. It's a race against time where a single heavy rainstorm or a minor earth tremor could undo decades of painstaking conservation work. This work is further complicated by a profound ethical dilemma: how to balance the demands of archaeological science with the need to respect these sites as living places of worship. For a team of archaeologists, an undisturbed tunnel sealed for centuries is a priceless time capsule. Every layer of sediment, every object left behind, even the microorganisms in the air, can provide crucial data about the daily lives of the monks. Their instinct is to excavate slowly, methodically, and to leave nothing unexamined. Yet, for the monastic communities that still inhabit these spaces, the tunnels are not an archaeological site but a sacred part of their present-day spiritual life. A sealed chamber might not be an exciting mystery to be solved, but the final resting place of a revered elder, a place that should remain inviolate out of respect. This has led to delicate negotiations where scientists and monks must work together to find a path forward that honors both faith and knowledge. The solution increasingly lies in the use of non-invasive technologies that allow us to learn without disturbing. Ground-penetrating radar and 3D laser scanning have become indispensable tools. Researchers can now create incredibly detailed digital maps of entire tunnel networks, revealing hidden chambers and structural weaknesses without ever touching a wall. Drones equipped with lights and cameras can fly into dangerous, unstable passages, sending back video that allows conservators to assess the damage without risking a human life. These digital models are more than just maps, they are virtual time machines. They allow us to understand the builder's original techniques, to simulate the effects of water flow and seismic activity, and to plan precise, minimal interventions that do the most good with the least amount of intrusion. This technology acts as a bridge between the past and the present, giving us the tools to protect these wonders while honoring the silence and sanctity that defines them. Ultimately, the work of preservation is a global endeavor, a testament to the universal value of these hidden spaces. Organizations like UNESCO and the World Monuments Fund work alongside local governments, monastic orders, and teams of international experts, pooling resources and expertise that no single entity could muster alone. The challenges are immense, the work is painstakingly slow, and the funding is never enough. But the mission is clear: to ensure that these subterranean pathways, these masterpieces of faith and ingenuity, do not fade back into the earth from which they were carved. They are a testament to human resilience, a physical connection to our collective past, and protecting them is our shared responsibility to future generations. These extraordinary architectural feats have not only survived in stone and earth, but have also been immortalized in the creative works of the human mind, their dark, winding forms capturing the imagination of artists and writers for centuries. Long before modern archaeology began to map their physical reality, the idea of the monastic tunnel was already a powerful symbol in our collective consciousness, representing everything from spiritual pilgrimage to terrifying uncertainty. One of the earliest depictions can be found in the intricate marginalia of illuminated manuscripts. In the lush borders of a medieval psalter, you might find a tiny, beautifully drawn scene of monks processing single file into a hill, a discreet doorway at its base. This was not just decoration, it was a visual metaphor for the monastic journey itself, a withdrawal from the brightly illuminated world of the senses into the dark, introspective space of prayer and contemplation, seeking divine light within the earth. The Renaissance, with its explosion of artistic interest in perspective, depth, and human emotion, saw painters begin to use these subterranean spaces to amplify the drama of sacred stories. The tunnels and catacombs of early Christian martyrs became a frequent backdrop for scenes of saintly life and martyrdom. Artists like Caravaggio used the stark contrast of light and shadow, a technique known as chiaroscuro, to incredible effect within these underground settings. In his paintings, a single, blinding shaft of light might pierce the overwhelming darkness of a catacomb, illuminating the faces of the faithful and symbolizing the sudden, miraculous intrusion of divine grace into a world of suffering and secrecy. These were not generic caves. They were recognizably man-made, with carved arches and niches, connecting the sanctity of the early church to the contemporary monastic world of the artist's own time, creating a powerful bridge between past and present. It was in the 18th and 19th centuries, however, with the rise of Gothic literature, that the monastic tunnel truly found its voice as a setting for suspense and psychological terror. Gothic novelists obsessed with the decay of the old feudal and Catholic order saw ruined abbeys and their hidden passages as the perfect stage for their tales of haunting and mystery. Anne Radcliffe, in her seminal novel The Mysteries of Udolpho, sends her heroine through the secret corridors of a gloomy castle and a ruined convent where the line between natural and supernatural horror is deliberately blurred. The tunnel here is a place of imprisonment and unknown threat, its silence broken only by the echo of a pursuer's footsteps or a distant, inexplicable groan. This literary tradition transformed the monastic tunnel from a symbol of faith into one of Gothic dread, a labyrinth where one could confront the ghosts of history or the darkest corners of the human psyche. This Gothic fascination evolved seamlessly into the modern era of film and television, where directors could use camera angles, sound design, and special effects to make audiences feel the claustrophobic weight of these ancient passages. The tunnel becomes a character in itself, a testing ground for heroes. In the adventure film The Name of the Rose, based on Umberto Eco's novel, the labyrinthine library hidden within the abbey is a direct descendant of these monastic tunnels, a vast, forbidden repository of knowledge where characters get lost, secrets are kept, and the final confrontation takes place. Modern horror films frequently use the premise of archaeologists or tourists accidentally awakening an ancient evil sealed within monastery crypts, leveraging the inherent creepiness of these long-sealed spaces. The sound of a door grinding shut, the flicker of a flashlight on wet walls, the realization that the map is wrong. These are all now standard tropes that can trace their lineage directly back to those first Gothic novels set in ruined abbeys. Beyond horror, these hidden pathways have also been used to explore profound themes of memory and history. The acclaimed video game Heaven's Vault, though set in a science fiction universe, centers on an archaeologist deciphering an ancient language. One of its most memorable sequences involves navigating the flooded, labyrinthine tunnels beneath a monastic asteroid, where the key to understanding the past lies not in grand temples, but in the quiet, hidden places where monks once worked and prayed. This reflects a more contemporary view of these spaces, not as settings for fear, but as repositories of lost stories, waiting for a sensitive interpreter to understand their whispers. From a tiny illumination in a prayer book to a pixelated corridor in a game, the monastic tunnel continues to be one of our most enduring narrative devices, proving that some of the most powerful journeys are the ones we take not across land, but deep into the heart of the unknown, and in doing so, often deeper into ourselves. When we compare the tunnel systems of Eastern and Western monastic traditions, we're looking at more than just different engineering solutions. We're seeing a profound divergence in spiritual philosophy, historical pressures, and the very relationship between a community and the world around it. The Western monastic tradition, particularly in Benedictine and Cistercian contexts, largely viewed its underground networks as a practical extension of the monastery above, a tool for managing a self-sufficient, often economically powerful religious estate. The tunnels were integrated into the daily function of a bustling community, designed for logistics, storage, and security against immediate, tangible threats like Viking raiders or royal dissolutions. Their purpose was often communal and defensive, meant to protect the physical body of the monastery, its people, its treasures, its supplies, so that its spiritual work could continue uninterrupted. The construction reflected this, often utilizing cut stone and mortar, built with a sense of permanence and order that mirrored the structured daily life of the rule of Saint Benedict. In the East, however, the purpose of these subterranean spaces often ran much deeper, touching the very core of spiritual practice. In Tibetan Buddhism, the tunnels and retreat caves were not for community logistics but for radical individual isolation, a deliberate separation from all worldly distractions to achieve enlightenment. The tunnels leading to a yongdom, or meditation cell, were not highways but symbolic passageways from the illusion of the material world, samsara, to the truth of enlightenment, nirvana. Similarly, the Byzantine monks of Cappadocia and the Coptic monks of Egypt used their tunnels not just to hide from physical invaders, but to safeguard their modes of worship itself during periods of iconoclasm and persecution. The tunnel was less about protecting the community's wealth and more about preserving the purity of its practice, often on a deeply personal, ascetic level. This fundamental difference in purpose is striking. In the West, tunnels often serve the community's earthly survival. In the East, they frequently serve the individual's path to spiritual transcendence. This divergence is vividly apparent in their construction methods. Western tunnels, like those at Mont Saint-Michel or beneath English abbeys, showcase a mastery of above-ground architectural principles applied below. They feature arched ceilings, squared stone blocks, and deliberate, navigable designs that feel like an extension of the cloister. They are built. In contrast, many Eastern tunnels feel born from the earth itself. The Gurim Valley in Cappadocia or the Lalibela complex in Ethiopia weren't constructed from quarried stone. They were sculpted through a process of meticulous subtraction, carved directly from the living rock. The Armenian and Coptic tunnelers were masters of working with the natural geology, following seams of soft stone and utilizing natural caverns, creating spaces that feel organic and hidden, as if the mountain itself was conspiring to protect its inhabitants. One method imposes human order upon the environment, the other seeks a harmonious, hidden existence within it. The spiritual significance assigned to these underground spaces further highlights the divide. In Western Christianity, while tunnels certainly had a sacred function like moving relics discreetly, they were rarely considered sacred spaces in their own right. The holiness was in the objects they protected or the churches they connected to. In the East, the tunnel itself could be a vital part of the spiritual experience. For Ethiopian Orthodox pilgrims at Lalibela, crawling through a narrow, pitch-black passage between two churches is a powerful reenactment of the journey through hell toward salvation. For a Tibetan Buddhist monk, the arduous path through a mountain tunnel to a meditation cell is an integral part of the purification process before the meditation even begins. The journey through the dark is itself a form of prayer, a ritual of transition. Ultimately, these differences in purpose, construction, and meaning reflect the distinct historical and cultural context that shaped these traditions. Western monasticism, evolving in a post-Roman Europe of fractured kingdoms and constant territorial conflict, developed a fortress mentality. Its tunnels are the product of a world where security was a daily concern for large, wealthy institutions. Eastern monasticism, whether in the Byzantine, Coptic, or Tibetan realms, often developed under the constant shadow of religious persecution or political domination, fostering a different kind of resilience, one that valued secrecy, personal asceticism, and the preservation of spiritual knowledge above all else. One tradition built tunnels to protect its place in the world, the other dug tunnels to transcend the world entirely. Both are breathtaking testaments to human adaptability and devotion, but they speak to the divine in two very different yet equally powerful languages. Yet beyond these walls of stone and faith, these tunnels served a purpose even more critical than physical survival. They became the silent, beating heart of a clandestine communications network, a medieval internet of light and shadow that allowed knowledge and warning to travel faster than any invading army. In an era where a letter could take weeks to deliver by horseback and was vulnerable to interception at every turn, the ability to send a secure message instantly was a superpower, and the monastic orders held it deep within the earth. The most sophisticated systems operated on principles of light and sound, technologies that were elegantly simple yet devastatingly effective. In regions with interconnected monasteries visible to each other across hilltops, such as in parts of France and Germany, the tunnels often led to high, hidden lookouts. From these vantage points, a complex language of signals could be relayed. A series of precisely timed lantern flashes after sunset, or puffs of smoke from a concealed vent during the day could carry a pre-arranged code. A single, long flash might signal the approach of a friendly bishop, while three rapid bursts could mean Viking longships had been sighted on the horizon, giving downstream communities priceless hours to prepare their own defenses and evacuate their treasures. For messages that required more nuance than a simple warning, the tunnels themselves became the medium. A runner, often a young, agile novice who knew the passageways by heart, could carry a verbal report or a small, sealed scroll from one abbey to another with unmatched speed and security. While a traveler on the open road would have to navigate bandits, muddy tracks, and curious lords at every checkpoint, the tunnel runner moved through a private, protected world. He could cover the distance between 2 points in a nearly straight line, unimpeded by rivers or forests, and emerge directly into the cellar of the recipient monastery, handing his message to the abbot without a single soul on the outside being any the wiser. This system allowed for the coordination of resources, the sharing of scholarly discoveries, and the discreet management of the order's vast economic interests across entire regions, all hidden from the view of secular authorities who might wish to interfere or tax their operations. The most perilous and vital communication, however, involved the forbidden text. During periods of intense religious persecution, such as the English Reformation or the iconoclast periods in the Byzantine Empire, certain books were deemed heretical and ordered to be burned. This included not only theological works that challenged the state-sanctioned doctrine, but also ancient philosophical texts, scientific treatises, and literary classics that were deemed a threat to the established order. The monastic tunnels became the central nervous system of a resistance movement dedicated to preserving this knowledge. A text condemned to the fire in London could be smuggled out in the dead of night, transported along a chain of safe houses that were often religious institutions, and ultimately delivered to a remote monastery with a secret library. There, deep in a concealed chamber only accessible through a pivoting bookcase or a trapdoor hidden under a flagstone, a scribe would work by candlelight to create a perfect copy of the dangerous book. The original could then be moved again further along the network while the copy was hidden away, ensuring that even if one repository was discovered and destroyed, the knowledge itself would not be lost. This incredible system functioned on a vow of silence and a hierarchy of secrecy. Knowledge of the full network was typically limited to the abbot and perhaps 1 or 2 trusted officials like the chamberlain or the precentor. A monk might know only the specific tunnel that led to his own assigned task, be it the wine cellar or the scriptorium, remaining blissfully unaware of the hidden turnoff 50 paces away that led to a miles-long passage to the next valley. This cellular structure was its greatest security feature. Even if a monk was captured and tortured, he could only reveal a tiny piece of the puzzle. The true map of the network existed not on parchment, which could be discovered, but in the collective memory of a trusted few, passed down orally from one generation of leaders to the next. In this way, for centuries, these underground pathways allowed a parallel world of learning and free thought to thrive beneath the feet of emperors, kings, and inquisitors, safeguarding the light of knowledge through history's most turbulent dark ages. But these tunnels offered more than just a means of escape or a hidden highway for supplies. For communities under threat, they provided the ultimate sanctuary for the soul itself. Deep within the earth, in chambers carved from silence and stone, monks constructed secret chapels and altars where worship could continue uninterrupted, no matter the danger raging in the world above. These were not rushed, makeshift spaces. They were often designed with profound care, mirroring the sacred geometry and symbolism of the grand churches overhead, yet condensed into an intimate, womb-like atmosphere that made the act of prayer feel both fiercely protected and intensely personal. The architectural features were deliberately crafted to serve both spiritual and practical needs. A rounded apse might be carved directly into the rock behind a simple stone altar, echoing the design of the main abbey church. Niches were cut into the walls to hold a single, precious candle whose light would flicker across a hidden fresco or a carved cross, ensuring that even the most basic liturgical elements were present. The very constraint of the space created an incredible feeling of closeness and community. Where a cathedral might inspire awe through vast height and light, these underground chapels achieved a different kind of holiness through profound intimacy and shared secrecy. The acoustic properties of these rock-cut spaces were not left to chance. The monks who designed them demonstrated a sophisticated, intuitive understanding of sound amplification. The hard, often slightly curved surfaces of the stone walls and ceilings acted as a natural soundboard, perfectly designed for the human voice in prayer. When a small group of monks gathered to chant the divine office, their plain song would resonate and swell within the chamber, creating a rich, enveloping drone that felt both immense and intimate. This amplification was a practical blessing. It allowed the chant to continue with full force even when the monks had to whisper to avoid detection. The very rock seemed to sing along with them, transforming their suppressed voices into a powerful, collective resonance that fortified their spirits. In some larger subterranean chapels, like those in the Cappadocian valleys, specific frequencies would create a haunting harmonic overtone, making the simple act of chanting a psalm feel like participating in a celestial choir. This acoustic miracle was a daily reassurance. The divine presence was not just remembered in these hiding places, but felt and heard, vibrating through the very stone that protected them. The ability to continue their sacred routines was paramount for these communities. The monastic day was structured around the Opus Dei, the work of God, which comprised chanting the liturgical hours at set times from before dawn until long after dusk. This rhythmic cycle of prayer was the heartbeat of the monastery, and its interruption was seen as a spiritual catastrophe. During a siege or a period of active persecution, when appearing in the main church was tantamount to suicide, the hidden underground chapel became the sole vessel keeping this sacred rhythm alive. A monk assigned as a lookout could signal the changing of the hours, and the community would filter silently through the tunnels to gather in the earth-encased chapel. There, by the light of a few carefully shielded lamps, they would sing matins, lauds, and vespers, their voices a quiet but unbreakable thread of devotion connecting them to every other monastic community past and present. This continuity was their greatest act of defiance. An invading force might seize their land, burn their buildings, and scatter their brothers, but they could not stop the prayer. It had simply moved underground, continuing unabated in a secret chamber, a testament to a faith that no earthly power could extinguish. Today, the ancient silence of these monastic tunnels is increasingly broken by the quiet hum of tourism, as more of these incredible sites open their hidden depths to a curious public. This access offers an unparalleled opportunity to walk through history, but it also introduces a complex set of challenges, forcing a delicate balance between preservation and public engagement. Some of the most extensive and well-managed tunnel networks can be found beneath European abbeys. The sprawling cellars of the Weltenberg Abbey in Germany, for instance, where monks have brewed beer since the 11th century, are now part of a guided tour. Visitors can descend into the cool, cavernous logering tunnels, learning about the monastic brewing tradition while seeing the ingenious engineering firsthand. Similarly, the fortified tunnels of Mont Saint-Michel have been integrated into the visitor route, allowing the public to appreciate the logistical genius that sustained the island community. These tours are carefully designed, often with timed tickets and restricted group sizes, to prevent overcrowding and minimize the impact of humidity and carbon dioxide from human breath on the ancient stonework. The ethical considerations of this tourism are profound. The very act of welcoming visitors inherently risks destroying the fragile environments we seek to appreciate. The soft sandstone walls of the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra catacombs are particularly vulnerable to the touch of thousands of hands and the moisture from countless breaths. In response, many sites have implemented strict conservation measures. At the Lalibela rock-hewn churches, all visitors must remove their shoes to walk on the sacred stone floors, reducing the abrasive grit tracked in from outside. Access to the narrowest, most fragile connecting tunnels is often limited to protect both the structure and the visitor, with viewing platforms allowing a safe glimpse into the depths. The revenue generated from these carefully managed tours is in many cases the primary funding source for the ongoing, monumental task of preservation, creating a symbiotic relationship where tourism, when done responsibly, directly fuels the conservation it necessitates. For those seeking the most raw and powerful first-hand experiences, certain sites remain refreshingly uncommercialized. The Skellig Michael experience is less a curated tour and more a pilgrimage. Access is severely limited by weather and strict conservation quotas, and the journey itself, a boat ride across often turbulent seas followed by a climb up those ancient vertiginous steps, filters out all but the most determined. There are no handrails on the original steps, no gift shops at the summit. The power of the place lies in its unadulterated harshness and beauty, allowing visitors to feel a genuine connection to the extreme devotion of the monks who once lived there. This model of limited, unforgiving access prioritizes the preservation of the site's spirit and substance over mass appeal. The future of experiencing these wonders may lie in technology that allows for exploration without physical presence. For sites too fragile for any foot traffic or tunnels that remain sealed for safety, digital archaeology offers a revolutionary solution. High-resolution 3D laser scanning has created incredibly detailed virtual models of networks like those at the Egmont Abbey in Austria. Soon, anyone with a virtual reality headset could take a guided, immersive tour through these digitally preserved spaces, examining intricate carvings up close without ever risking damage to the originals. This technology doesn't replace the awe of being there, but it democratizes access to the world's most vulnerable heritage, offering a profound and preservative way to satisfy our collective curiosity about these hidden worlds that have guarded their secrets for 1,000 years. Despite the incredible discoveries made by modern technology, the world of monastic tunnels is still defined by its profound and tantalizing unknowns, a realm where hard evidence gives way to legend and the boundaries of exploration are constantly being redrawn. Perhaps the greatest of these enduring mysteries are the sealed passages, the doorways that have remained stubbornly shut for centuries, guarding their secrets behind walls of masonry, rock, and time. Almost every major monastic site has one, a walled-up archway, a blocked tunnel entrance, or a stone slab that simply doesn't sound right when tapped. At Fountains Abbey in England, ground-penetrating radar has revealed several such anomalies, suggesting tunnels that branch off from the known cellar network and head in the direction of the nearby river, their purpose and destination completely unknown. The question is not just what lies behind them, but why they were sealed with such permanence. Was it to contain a structural collapse, to hide a sacred treasure too precious to be moved, or to forever conceal the entrance to a sanctuary after it was used one final time? The silence behind these stones is a powerful invitation to speculation, a permanent question mark etched into the very foundations of history. Beyond the known sealed portals, there persist rumors of entire networks that remain uncharted, vast subterranean landscapes that have been lost to memory. These are not the stuff of pure fantasy, but often inferences drawn from architectural oddities and frustrating gaps in the historical record. In the great Cistercian Abbey of Clairvaux in France, historical documents reference a tunnel system used for drainage and communication that was so extensive it was described as a second abbey underground. While portions have been mapped, historians and archaeologists are convinced that the full scale of this subterranean world is still unknown, with entire sections likely collapsed or flooded and waiting to be rediscovered. Similarly, beneath the ancient monasteries of Mount Athos in Greece, the strict prohibition on outside visitors and the monks' own code of secrecy have kept the full extent of their underground connections a closely guarded mystery. Whispers among scholars suggest that the 20 different ruling monasteries on the peninsula are linked by ancient pathways, a theory supported by the sudden, unexplained appearance of monks from one monastery at the gates of another during times of crisis, with no evidence of them having traveled by the surface roads. Modern technology, for all its power, often serves more to deepen the mystery than to solve it. Ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR scans frequently reveal tantalizing voids and linear anomalies that defy easy interpretation. A recent survey of the catacombs beneath Naples, which intertwine with later monastic crypts, detected a large, empty space behind a wall that had been untouched since the 17th century. The shape was all wrong for a burial chamber or a storage cellar. It was long and narrow like a corridor, but it led nowhere, ending abruptly in solid rock. Was it the beginning of an escape tunnel that was abandoned, a natural fissure, or something else entirely? The ethical dilemma of exploration is acute. Drilling a core sample or breaking through a wall could provide answers, but it could also irrevocably damage an irreplaceable archaeological site or destabilize the structure above. So these ghostly images on a radar screen remain just that, ghosts, their stories hinted at but never fully told, a digital map of our own ignorance. This has not stopped modern adventurers from trying to answer these questions. The most exciting explorations are often collaborations between daring cavers and cautious archaeologists. Using non-invasive techniques like endoscopic cameras, teams can now drill a tiny, millimeter-wide hole through an ancient block doorway and snake a fiber optic cable through to see what lies beyond. In one recent project at a monastery in Slovakia, this technique revealed not a collapsed tunnel, but a perfectly intact stone staircase descending into darkness, its steps worn smooth by centuries of use, a snapshot of a hidden world frozen in time. The decision on what to do next is never taken lightly. Do they break the seal and enter, or do they preserve the doorway as they found it, leaving the staircase and its secrets undisturbed for future generations with even better technology? This is the central, thrilling conflict of modern monastic tunnel research, the relentless human drive to know, constantly balanced against the profound responsibility to preserve the mystery itself. For the monks who built and inhabited them, these tunnels were far more than practical passages. They were profound spiritual landscapes, physical manifestations of an inner journey toward divine connection. In the symbolic language of medieval Christianity, the act of descending into the earth was rich with meaning. It represented a voluntary death to the worldly self, a humbling submission and a letting go of ego, much like a seed must be buried in the dark soil before it can sprout and reach for the light. The narrow, constricted entrance mirrored the biblical concept of the narrow gate that leads to salvation, a difficult path that few choose to follow. As a monk would leave the sunlit courtyard and step into the cool, shadowy passageway, He was enacting a powerful ritual of withdrawal, leaving behind the distractions and sensory overload of the outside world to enter a realm of focused contemplation. This journey through the dark was often designed as a deliberate, multi-stage meditation on the core tenets of their faith. In the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition at Lalibela, this is made explicitly physical. Pilgrims are guided to crawl through a completely dark, narrow tunnel that connects the church of Bet Mariam with the church of Bet Medhain Alam. This arduous, disorienting passage is not a shortcut. It is a required part of the pilgrimage, symbolizing a harrowing journey through hell and the darkness of a soul without God. Emerging, blinking into the brilliant sunlight of the church courtyard is a powerful reenactment of resurrection and redemption, a visceral experience of moving from spiritual death into glorious new life. The physical challenge of the crawl, the scraped knees, the struggle for breath, the claustrophobic fear makes the theological concept of salvation through Christ's sacrifice tangibly real and profoundly personal. Beyond this communal symbolism, the deepest and most isolated tunnels served as the ultimate setting for a vision quest, a sacred space for confronting the self and seeking direct, unmediated experience of the divine. In the Celtic tradition, this often took the form of an anchoritic retreat, where a monk would voluntarily be enclosed in a small, sealed cell, often connected to the main church by only a tiny window through which food would be passed. While not a tunnel in the traditional sense, this practice shared the same spiritual DNA of radical isolation and descent into darkness for purification. The goal was to achieve a state of profound clarity and connection, to have the worldly self dissolve away until only the presence of God remained. In these silent, stone-walled spaces, sensory deprivation would heighten spiritual awareness, and the boundaries between prayer, dream, and waking vision could blur, leading to transformative enlightenment experiences that were the ultimate goal of the ascetic life. This concept finds a powerful parallel in the Eastern traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, where advanced practitioners would enter years-long retreat in isolated mountain caves or yongdoms, accessible only by treacherous paths or hidden tunnels. Here, the darkness and silence were not punishments but essential tools for piercing the veil of illusion or maya. The physical confinement was meant to force the mind inward to confront its own nature without distraction. The tunnel leading to such a retreat was the final threshold, the last point of contact with the community and the mundane world. To pass through it was to commit to a journey with no guarantee of return, either physically or psychologically. The experiences sought in these depths, whether a Christian monk's vision of Christ or a Buddhist monk's realization of the nature of mind, were considered the highest possible human attainments, the true treasures these tunnels were built to protect and facilitate. This veneration of the underground as a sacred space is a thread that runs through countless mystical traditions across the globe, long predating medieval monasticism. From the Paleolithic shamanic journeys depicted in cave paintings at Lascaux, where artists ventured deep into the earth to access spiritual realms and bring back visions, to the ancient Greek oracles who delivered prophecies from subterranean chambers filled with vapors believed to induce a divine frenzy, humanity has consistently looked beneath the surface for ultimate truth. The monastic tunnel builders were participating in this ancient, archetypal human impulse. They sanctified the dark, transforming places of potential fear into sanctuaries of hope. They understood that sometimes, to reach the greatest heights of spiritual understanding, one must first be willing to make the deepest descent, guided only by faith through the darkness. From the windswept isolation of Skellig Michael to the sun-scorched cliffs of Cappadocia, and from the rock-hewn majesty of Lalibela to the fortified corridors of Mont Saint-Michel, the story of these hidden tunnels is a testament to a shared global ingenuity. We've journeyed across continents and through millennia, uncovering how these subterranean networks were far more than mere passageways. They were masterpieces of engineering, born from a profound understanding of stone, sound, and soil. They were fortresses of faith, safeguarding not just gold and relics, but the very heartbeat of prayer during times of unimaginable peril. They were libraries of light, preserving the fragile flame of knowledge through history's darkest winters. And they were secret highways connecting communities of the spirit across vast and treacherous landscapes. What emerges from the darkness is a powerful, unifying truth about the human spirit. Whether motivated by devotion, defense, or the pure pursuit of understanding, these monastic communities displayed a resilience that is nothing short of breathtaking. They looked at a hostile world, be it invaders, persecutors, or the raw, unforgiving power of nature, and responded not with surrender but with stunning creativity. They chose to dig, to carve, and to hide, ensuring that what they held most sacred would endure. These tunnels are the ultimate symbol of that quiet, unbreakable stubbornness. They represent the refusal to let the light be extinguished, choosing instead to preserve it deep within the earth, waiting for a time when it could shine again. This incredible legacy is not confined to the past. It invites us to look at our own world with fresh eyes, to wonder what secrets might still lie just beneath our feet. Perhaps there's a forgotten passage near you, a local legend of a hidden tunnel, or a historic site with a basement that doesn't quite match the floor plans above. The adventure of discovery is far from over. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever explored a mysterious underground space? Does your town have a legend about a secret tunnel? Share your own stories and knowledge in the comments below. Let's continue this exploration together, unearthing the whispers of the past that are waiting even now to be heard.